Why do you always attract the same type of person? People who at first seem different, but in the end make you feel the same things, like frustration, exhaustion, or abandonment. Maybe you think it's just bad luck, or that the problem is always with the other person, but what if it's something deeper? Something that is influencing your choices without you realizing it. Carl Jung, one of the greatest names in psychology, said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. What you call a pattern in your relationships may actually be the reflection of your own mind trying to become whole. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. In this video, you will understand the invisible mechanism that repeats emotional cycles in your life and how it might be sabotaging your happiness. What you will discover here is not only the reason behind these repetitions, but how to finally break this cycle. By the end of this video, you will have enough clarity to change the way you connect with people. For good, Luke was 32 years old and had just come out of another relationship. The third in less than 2 years. He said he loved intensely, that he gave himself completely, that he did everything for the other person. But in the end, he always felt the same way. Ignored, rejected, as if he were too small for the love he believed he deserved. When we sat down to talk, he said something that stuck in my mind. He said, "I must have a magnet for emotionally unavailable people." The pain in his eyes was not just about the end of the relationship, it was about realizing that this had happened before. More than once. The face changes, the name changes, but the final feeling is always the same. Luke grew up in a home where affection was scarce. His father was absent, emotionally cold. His mother, critical and unpredictable. From an early age, he learned to fight for scraps of attention, to feel that he had to earn someone else's affection. Without realizing it, he began to associate love with effort, with insecurity, with pain. And this emotional mold, built back then, became the filter through which he sees and chooses his relationships to this day. The truth is, the unconscious doesn't want what is comfortable. It wants what is familiar. And what is familiar to Luke is emotional absence, coldness, the challenge of trying to prove he is worthy of being loved. The problem is that all of this happens without him noticing. He believes he is following his heart. But in practice, it's his unconscious repeating the same story, hoping that this time the ending will be different. What Luke didn't know is that the first step to breaking this cycle is not to find someone better. It is to look inward and understand why his pattern repeats. Because what he lives on the outside is just the projection of something unresolved inside him. And this, Jung called the shadow. When you keep attracting the same type of person, it's not a coincidence, it's a pattern. And every psychological pattern has an origin, a function, and above all, an unresolved emotional root. Most people believe they choose their relationships based on reason or chemistry. But what is really in control is the unconscious, and the unconscious seeks what is compatible with its oldest emotional records, even if those records are linked to pain. That's why so many people feel drawn to those who reject them, ignore them, or avoid commitment. Because that feeling activates an old, familiar internal script, deeply engraved in the emotional system. The unconscious mind does not distinguish past from present. If in the past affection was scarce, unstable, or conditional, it will consider that as normal, and it will seek to repeat that pattern in the present, even if rationally you say you want something different. And this is where the conflict lies, because consciously you say you want someone stable, loving, and present. But unconsciously, you are attracted to those who trigger your deepest wounds, people who make you feel insecure, anxious, or rejected. Not because you enjoy suffering, but because the suffering feels familiar. It fits the emotional mold created in your childhood. And that mold keeps operating in silence, guiding your choices and sabotaging your chances of experiencing healthy love. The emotional escalation is brutal. First, you idealize. Then, you give yourself. Next, you start to feel that something is wrong, but you can't stop. And when it all ends, you blame yourself. And worse, you ask if the problem is you. The answer is yes, but not in the way you think. It's not that you are incapable of loving or being loved. It's that you are trying to solve, in your current relationships, traumas that happened long before them. And as long as you are not aware of this, you will keep seeking people who make you relive those wounds. Not because it brings pleasure, but because the unconscious believes that if you relive the pain, maybe this time you can heal it. But that never happens, because healing is not repeating, it is integrating. And this process of integration is what Carl Jung called individuation. And it is exactly at this point that true transformation begins. But before getting there, it is necessary to understand what deep psychology, ancient traditions, and great spiritual teachers have to say about this inner process. And their answer can completely change the way you see yourself and relate to others. Carl Jung was one of the first psychologists to state that our romantic relationships are actually living reflections of our unconscious. He said that we fall in love with what we need to integrate within ourselves. According to him, every time we feel a strong attraction to someone, it's not just chemistry, it's projection. We project onto the other person what we don't recognize or accept within ourselves. Jung called this anima and animus, the unconscious feminine part of the man and the unconscious masculine part of the woman. When we see something in the other that touches this hidden part of us, we are magnetically drawn. But we are not falling in love with the person. We are falling in love with a part of ourselves that they activated. And this explains why so many people feel trapped in painful relationship cycles. Because it's not the other person who is causing the pain. It's the mirror they represent. They reflect what is missing, what is wounded, what has not yet been acknowledged. And that is exactly why breaking the pattern requires inner work. No external change will be enough while the internal emotional root remains active. But this wisdom isn't just in Jung's psychology. It is echoed in ancient traditions like Buddhism, which teaches that everything you attract is a reflection of your mind. That attachment is born from the illusion that something outside of you will complete what is missing inside. Taoism speaks about the balance of opposites, yin and yang, and how we unconsciously seek what we believe we lack, but only find peace when we become whole on our own. In some schools of Kabbalah, there is the concept of tikkun, a kind of spiritual correction. According to this idea, you reincarnate with certain tendencies and challenges you need to overcome. And relationships are one of the most direct ways to expose these internal flaws, not as punishment, but as opportunities for growth. Modern science also contributes to this understanding. Studies in affective neuroscience show that the brain forms emotional connections based on early experiences. Children who grow up in unstable environments tend to develop anxious attachment systems. And these systems remain active in adulthood, seeking partners who unconsciously trigger the same emotional signals from the past. The problem is that these signals are not about safety. They are about struggle. Struggle for attention. Struggle for validation. Struggle for love. And this creates relationships where love stops being an exchange and becomes survival. Having access to this knowledge is like having the map to a maze you've been trapped in your whole life. Because understanding is not just knowing, it's recognizing the signs when they appear. It's noticing when your heart wants to follow a familiar but destructive path. And above all, it's having the tools to choose differently, to rewrite your emotional story, to step out of the cycle of repetition, and into the process of individuation, where love is no longer a desperate search for fulfillment, but an expression of inner wholeness. But before you can apply all of this, there's still one missing key, a piece of information that almost no one talks about, but that is essential to break the cycle once and for all. It's in the next section. There is an invisible detail behind every repetitive emotional pattern that almost no one notices. A silent, subtle, but extremely powerful mechanism. And it is precisely this mechanism that sustains the repetition in your relationships. This detail is not in your behaviors or in your conscious decisions. It lies in the internal image you have of yourself. Jung called this the idealized self. It is the version of yourself you believe you need to be in order to deserve love. And the problem is that this version was often built out of pain, rejection, or abandonment. It is not who you truly are. It is who you learn to be in order to be accepted. Since childhood, you picked up signals from your environment. Maybe they told you that you had to be strong all the time, or that you needed to please others, or that you should hide to avoid being a burden. And you shaped your personality around that. Over time, you stopped living with authenticity and started operating through strategies. Emotional survival strategies. And these strategies create an invisible field around you that attracts people who are compatible with your wounded version, not your true essence. That's why, even after reading books, going to therapy, or understanding your traumas, you might still find yourself repeating the same patterns. Because the problem is not just in your rational mind, it's in much deeper layers. In the body, in emotional memories, in automatic responses. And until these layers are accessed, you will keep attracting people who reinforce this distorted self-image. The detail that few people reveal is that the unconscious doesn't change through words. It changes through experience. Only when you live new emotions with new meanings does your system start creating different pathways. But how do you access this kind of experience in a safe, conscious, and transformative way? And how can you know if what you feel for someone is true love or just emotional repetition? These questions have answers, but they require you to enter a place within yourself that you may have never explored. A territory where love is not neediness, where the other is not a necessity, and where being alone is not emptiness, but freedom. There is a step, simple and yet profound, that can begin this process, a step that Carl Jung considered essential for any real transformation, and it will be revealed next. The step that transforms. Repetitive emotional patterns is not seeking another relationship. It is building, for the first time, a real relationship with yourself. And that begins with the recognition of your own shadow. Jung said that until we make the unconscious conscious, it governs our lives, and we call it fate. Luke, the man you met at the beginning of this story, spent years trying to find someone who would love him the way he needed. But the truth is, no one could offer that. Because he didn't see himself as someone worthy of unconditional love. It was only when he stopped looking outward and started diving into the parts of himself he used to avoid that the transformation began. He discovered that he didn't need to prove his worth, that he wasn't weak for feeling deeply, that he didn't need to erase himself to be chosen. This process was painful, but little by little, he began to notice that something inside him was changing. For the first time, he started to feel whole, even while being alone. He began to say no to relationships he used to accept, out of fear of loneliness. And for the first time, he began to choose himself. This isn't magic. It's emotional neuroplasticity. His brain started creating new connections based on safety, self-esteem, and self-respect. And what happened next was inevitable. He stopped being drawn to unstable, cold, or distant people. Because what once seemed attractive now felt dysfunctional, and what once felt boring, like a calm, present, and secure love, now became desirable. This is the power of integration. When you embrace your shadow, heal your wounded inner child, and reconnect with your essence, the love you attract begins to reflect the love you have built within yourself. And the most incredible thing is that this doesn't just change your relationships. It changes the way you move through the world. You begin to stand your ground more firmly. You set boundaries more clearly. You start to feel worthy of what you once only dreamed of. Because now, you are no longer trying to earn love. You are radiating love. And that changes everything. But there was something Luke still didn't know. A deeper truth, revealed only to those truly ready to see beyond the obvious. Something that can take your self-understanding to an entirely new level. And that will be revealed at the end. There is a question that few people ask themselves, but it can completely change how you see your emotional experiences. What if what you call love is actually an attachment to pain? What if your heart is addicted to intense emotions, not because they feel good, but because they feel familiar? According to Jung, the soul longs for wholeness, not repetition. But the mind, when wounded, clings to what it already knows. Healing lies in breaking this cycle, and for that, you need to make a choice that not everyone is ready to make. the choice to stop chasing and start looking within, the choice to no longer settle for less than what, deep down, you know you deserve. Luke made that choice, and in doing so, he accessed what Jung would call the deep self, an internal state of balance, presence, and love that doesn't depend on anyone else. But this is only the beginning. Because once you become whole, a new challenge arises. How do you connect with someone without losing yourself? How do you stay close without giving up your truth? How do you build a mature, conscious love that is free from projection? These are the kinds of questions that change lives. And that's exactly what we're going to explore in the next video. If you felt that this message touched something inside you, subscribe to the channel now. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next part of this journey. Like this video if it made sense to you, and share it with someone you know who is going through the same emotional cycle. Sometimes, all someone needs is a new perspective to begin a new story.